Hello again. So now I want to talk to you about perspective grids. Perspective grids are something we use when we're going to get into more complicated things. When you're doing concept art and you're trying to design a landscape with lots of objects and buildings and things like that, one thing that becomes super helpful is if you start by putting a perspective grid on your page before you start building any of the objects. And by doing this, it will make life a little bit easier for you because you're already kind of building out your plane here. And it makes it easier to visualize what's happening, especially, if you're still having trouble visualizing. If you start with this, it will make it easier because it just helps you see what's happening. So I have 3 setups here. I've got 1 point. So I got 1 point, I've got 2 point, and I've got 3 point. And so I'm going to go through each one of these and talk to you about how we would make a perspective grid for them. So let's talk about 1 point here. Now I'm just going to start kind of making lines out here and going out from my vanishing point. The important thing when it comes to perspective grids is you honestly don't have to measure it. I do want you to use a ruler, but these don't need to be evenly spaced in any way, shape, or form. Just having a series of lines that go out from your vanishing point already starts to just help kind of build a plane. So right now, essentially what we're doing is building the ground. So we're standing here, we're looking up, or not looking up, sorry, we're looking straight ahead because it's 1 point perspective. But what we see is actually, let me get my smaller ruler. Yeah, what we see is sky above us, and then this is the ground below us. So I'm building a perspective grid for the ground. And these are just kind of arbitrarily thrown up, just trying to make them evenly spaced. You don't even need this many. I just was doing it for the first one. And then we need them to recede backwards too. And if you remember how the perspective works, things will start to look like they are closer together as we get farther back. So I'm gonna attempt to make these look like they're getting closer and closer together as they get closer to the vanishing point, because eventually they'll be so close together that they vanish. That's the whole point. Okay, let's do one more. Okay, you can see by doing this already, I've created this illusion that there is a ground here, and it kind of helps you. It already gives you a basis for building things. So let's say I want to now make a cube, and I'm going to do this using my ruler because this is the best way to get straight lines. I'm going to build a cube in 1 point perspective, and I know that when you start 1 point perspective, you always start with the front face, and then I'm going to go back to my vanishing point to figure out my sides. I'm going to say it's this high, and since I have this kind of grid already here that I'm kind of just following it, I don't necessarily have to go back to my vanishing point if I just follow the lines. And this is helpful when you have a really big page and this huge grid on it, and it saves you the time from having to measure back to the line every single time. Okay, let's make another one. I'm gonna make one that's kind of back here. And so by having this grid, it is giving this illusion of depth. It's already giving us this illusion that this box is farther back because it looks like it's farther back on the line here. And it's also making it look like it's actually sitting on the ground. Let's do this here. So here we go. So now we can shade in this side, shade in this side. And by having this grid already built out, just helps with this illusion. So I'm going to do another one here, and this one is going to be as if the sky is the grid. So I'm doing it above. I'm going to do a little bit less this time. Just kind of arbitrarily, evenly spacing it, sort of. It's not really necessary to grid it. You could sit here and go like every 1/4 inch. Undo that, and then make a line that goes to each one, or something of that size. You definitely could. If you have the need to feel like you need an even grid, go ahead and do it. Especially if you're doing something that you want all your buildings to be the same size, that's a great way to start. But, you know, real world things aren't always the same size, so we can get away with kind of eyeballing it. And you can see how these are getting slightly farther apart as we go. So in this one, you know, this is our ground here and this is our sky. So it can look like, or let's say we're underneath a floor maybe, or sitting under a table. This is the bottom side of the table. So now I can do the same thing, where I can have a square or a cube going back into perspective. And by having this grid here, it is giving us this illusion that it's kind of like sitting on the bottom of this plane here. I could do, let's do a smaller one back here. It's a little tiny one. This one will make it look like it's really far back. Maybe it'll be longer. And this does help us just trick the eye a little bit more. So this could be helpful for when designing clouds. If you wanted clouds to be sitting in your sky, you can kind of lay out forms of clouds, you know, figure out the cubes and then put like a cloud shape inside of it. And that way your clouds look like they're going in perspective. Okay, and let's move on to the 2-point perspective grid. Now for this one, to make it a little easier, I'm gonna pull out multiple colors here. So, the reason I'm doing this is because, especially when we get into 2-point perspective, this can be a little bit more difficult to discern what's happening if you're just using like one color. So by, you know, using different colors for each vanishing point, it just really helps you with that visualization, helps you see what's going on here. And then I'll do blue for this side. Oops. Okay, so now we're getting this sense of depth here. We can see like this 3D form kind of evolving in front of us. So now if we wanted to make another cube, and perspective grids, as I said, you know, they're great if you're doing like animation, like concept art, but this is great in kind of any of your other artwork. If you're, you know, designing a landscape scene, but also if you're doing like a still life, because if you figure out the perspective of your still life, especially if you have a lot of like cylindrical objects in it, like bottles and cups and stuff, by figuring out this, figuring out your grid, it's just going to make it easier. You know, you're not guessing as much. It kind of helps you build the space. And we can do the same thing where we're going to let's put another object on its side. And remember, once again, when you're starting with 2-point perspective, you always start with the corner that is closest to you. And because it's 2-point perspective, the sides always recede backwards to the 2 different vanishing points, but these the vertical lines are still going straight up and down vertically and are parallel to each other. It's not till we get to 3-point perspective that they start to go at an angle. Okay, so now we have another object, and you can see I don't have it just like within the bottom half. I can have it extending above this top half of the picture, and it just looks like it's sitting on the ground right now. And then let's do the same thing for our one here. We're going to do the sky in 2-point perspective essentially. It'll be up to you to figure out like how many lines you really feel like you need. Okay, let's get my blue. Bet you didn't think we were going to be using colored pencils in this class, did you? Okay, so now we have our sky that looks like it's going back into a 2-point perspective here. And we can do the same thing. Let's start with the front edge. You can see I am kind of starting on areas where I already have lines, because it just makes it a little bit easier if you start on them. Helps me visualize where this is going to go. Okay, and now when we're doing this doesn't necessarily mean that these objects have to be below. You know, if it's on, we're doing the sky here, it doesn't have to be like coming down from the sky or vice versa. I want to do one that looks like it's above this plane here. So let's do one right. Whoops. Let me get. That's okay. I could just take more lead out. And it just needs a little sharpening. Don't know my own strength. Okay, let's try that again. Do here. And so I'm imagining this is the bottom of an object, and I'm gonna have it go right up off of the page. So it still looks like we're looking up at it. It still looks like we're underneath it. I remember 2-point perspective, we're still looking forward. This is where our line of sight is, but it looks like it is above us. Okay, now let's go to our 3-point perspective grid. Now I'm gonna introduce one more color here for our 3rd point. And to deal with, you know, where the third points are for them, essentially this box here, this is our horizon line, and this is that 3rd vanishing point. And so this box here, this is our horizon line with our 2 vanishing points, and the 3rd one's down here. So it's a little confusing at first, but you'll see once I start drawing it here how it all comes together. So I'll start with my 2 points, since essentially 3-point perspective is 2 points with 1 more point. So I can do my 2 points here, and because in this one here, you know, I'm drawing the ground, we're looking down at this, so you're literally basically standing and looking downwards at the ground. And what I'm going to make this look like is that we're standing on top of a building and looking down at a cityscape, kind of like I mentioned earlier. So let's do this one here. And remember, the vanishing point isn't on the page at all. It's above our page. So in our drawing, we never see our horizon line. We never actually see our vanishing point. Everything is off the page. But you can feel that, right? Does this feel like we're looking downwards? Now the more important part to make this look like 3-point is to get this third one in here. So for this plane here, our third point is this one all the way on the bottom. So I'm gonna draw my third plane, or my third set of lines, my perspective grid. Lost my train of thought there. Going down from this. So essentially these are going all the way down to here, but I'm only drawing within my picture plane. And just doing this will really help you to start visualize what's happening. Oops, oh no, I went too far. Oh well, just pretend it's not there. Okay, so then if I want to draw my buildings, I'm gonna draw this here. I'm gonna draw the top of a building. I don't have to exactly follow on the lines, but they will help as a guideline. Oops. So this is the top of a building, and then the side would be this. And so these are going back to our vanishing point. Remember, the vanishing point is directly in the center of the page. It's not off to the side, it's always right through the center. Okay, so now we got one building. And then let's do another one. Maybe this one's kind of in front of that one there. There we go. So here's another side of the building. So it looks like we're here. We're Spider-Man sitting onto the top of the buildings, looking downwards at the city. Okay, now let's do our last one here, where we are now looking upwards. So let's grab our green one. So because we are looking downwards, or sorry, we're going to be looking upwards this time. That's why our horizon line is below the page. Now, I didn't say that you're going to have to do this, so this is not homework or anything, but I would recommend doing this yourself in your notebook, because this is really going to help you understand what's happening. Okay, so now it's starting to feel like we're looking upwards here. And then we need our third point. So the point for this one is all the way up here. Okay, there we go. We feel like we're looking upwards already. So I want to make the bottom of a box here. So it's kind of like we're under a glass table looking upwards at some boxes that are on the table. Figure out my sides, because the sides are going to go back to that vanishing point. And to figure out the top, remember we gotta go back to our side vanishing points here. And there we go. We've got another object that we're underneath, looking upwards at. And then let's do one more. Let's do one that's almost going off the page too. So let's start here. And to figure out the sides, we go back to our vanishing point up top. I ended up drawing the back one. So I actually ended up drawing the inside of a cube here. So this would be this side. Okay, so here's our perspective grids, and this is how you can use them to really help you visualize and see what's happening. They're really, really useful, especially when you get into more complicated subject matters, which we will be doing that soon. So this is something that we may come in handy as we move forward.